What's up? Fine then. What's up? Fine then. What's up? Fine then. Okay, I know my stats suck, but come on. Who are you gonna pick? What, are you gonna pick Leo? Come on, I'm the only one here. Go ahead and pick me so we can get on with the review and get going. Okay, thank you.
I don't think there's a more nostalgic sports title for me than 1080 Snowboarding, and seeing as how it's still winter, it's as good a time as any to dust it off and crack it out again. Everything from the music to the graphics made this game one of the coolest back in 1998. But cool 20 years ago doesn't always mean cool today, so how does this title hold up in 2017? Well, let's check it out. Huh. 1080? That's a weird way of saying that. Well, anyway, 1080 Snowboarding was developed by Nintendo Entertainment Analysis and Development, EAD, the same blokes behind the Wave Race series.
And when it came out in early 1998, 1080 found itself in fresh powder.
That's just some slope slang for a market that's unsaturated.
Nice try.
There was nothing around that looked and played as good in the pre-Tony Hawk world.
And yeah, I hear you, but bam, PC Master Race for the win, dude. Well, Ski Free doesn't count because of its depiction of snowboarders as brash and uncaring monsters. Shameful.
Accessing any mode of the game brings you to the iconic character select screen. Here you pick one of 5 very distinct characters. Rob Haywood and Kensuke Kimachi are your kind of all-rounders, while Dion Blaster is the bigger guy with the higher top speed. Akari Hayami and Ricky Winterborn, a bit on the nose, don't you think, are more suited to stunts than racing. Once you pick a rider, obviously you'll need to pick a board. And frankly, I've never understood this. Look at the stats on this one. Pretty good, right? Okay, now how about this one? Why would I ever pick this one? Now, during gameplay, I can hardly tell any difference in handling or speed between any of the boards anyway, so I tend to pick them based on looks. Besides hanging around the lodge with the cool kids, for a boarding game with 1080 degrees literally in the title, it's a bit surprising that the main focus is actually on racing rather than pulling rad tricks. Match Race, the main tournament mode, is just about getting down the hill faster than the other guy, while the other guy has a sick handicap enabled. Seriously, no matter how fast your rider is, on Expert, even the slowest guy can overtake you if you don't execute a perfect run. Besides racing, you also need to avoid taking damage from falls and collisions that will eventually put you out of commission. The AI isn't perfect, and in fact they'll occasionally make mistakes, but they won't stop from taking too much damage. So gameplay generally amounts to balancing high speed with controllability. And for the time, 1080 excelled at this. Usually. The controls feel pretty much as fluid as EAD's comparable masterpiece Wave Race 64, and it's another example of Nintendo's analog stick really proving its worth.
The joystick leans your rider, and pulling back while grounded actually allows you to edge down the slope for the odd situation where you need to slow down, or for the odd situation where you want to play like how you actually ride in real life. Yeah, that pretty much looks like me.
You can crouch with Z for extra speed, which you'll be doing a lot, but keep in mind it also decreases your maneuverability, so you'll probably be switching it on and off depending on the treacherousness of the area at the time. Of course, what's a snowboarding game without rad tricks? The next mode down is Trick Attack, which is the stunt mode of the game, and again, pretty much like Wave Race 64, you have to clear checkpoints as you go, and time is really tight. This keeps you from simply jumping in place over and over to rack up a big score, but it also makes this mode frustrating AF. Of course, first you need to learn the tricks, and for that, jump into the training mode and pick a side. Left, trust me, you probably want left. On the halfpipe, you can choose grabs you want to learn or practice and go crazy. But that's easy. If you really want a challenge, try the spin moves.
60.
Because each one involves a combination of button presses and stick rotations, the different spins get progressively more difficult. Living up to the name of the game, 3 full rotations, the 1080, is by far the most difficult trick to pull off.
I mean, look at all these commands. I don't want to rewrite the code for the game. I just want to do 3 spins. And this is probably my biggest peeve with the game. I mean, sure, landing a spin IRL is probably really difficult to do, but it's not like calculating orbital rendezvous. rocket science.
What's with all the control inputs? In my opinion, spins should have been integrated more naturally into the game. For instance, what if you just had to hold R and push left or right to spin? Then you could have done 360 nose grabs and stuff on the slopes, not just in the halfpipe, where apparently the laws of physics break down.
367 900.
A 1080 is freaking impossible.
367 1080, clean air.
Okay, in all seriousness, I've done 1080s before, but like 15 years ago, and maybe only like 2 or 3. I go to capture footage for this review, and I do like 5 of them. Who knew?
367 1080.
Your trick skill and racing skill both come into play in contest mode, probably the most interesting gameplay option. In this, you play a handful of courses, interspersed with a halfpipe course and the air make ski jump course. The goal is to rack up points, but you also contend with time limits and slalom gates on the courses, which give you points as well as extend your time.
Learning how to do tricks is not that useful for match race mode, although I would say it earns you some style points in my book. But learning how to stick landings is a critical skill, and one that's not that intuitive.
The idea is that as long as you line your board up to be parallel to the ground, you'll stick it, but this doesn't always seem to work.
Sounds like we need a Dome Candy Games pro tip.
Apparently tapping Z right as you land helps to stick landings. And this makes sense, it's almost like your boarder is absorbing the shock by crouching. This seems to work most of the time, but it's not really obvious.
Tapping Z to land has kind of evolved into a superstition for me. I do it all the time, even though I'm not always 100% sure it's actually doing anything. Sometimes everything looks good and you still botch the landing. What did I do there? Seriously, for people who have never played the game, landing jumps is probably going to be the biggest sticking point. But you know what?
Too bad.
Time attack and versus modes are two sides of the same coin. It's all about getting through the course the fastest without dying, and if you want to play with a friend, well, you can do that too. But that's really the extent of multiplayer, as there's no multiplayer contest or stunt mode. Performance in 2-player is pretty good, but graphical quality is understandably stripped back, with heavy fog, low poly models, and a lack of other visual effects. The courses in the game are well varied visually, and most of them offer several branching pathways down the mountain. A favorite of mine is Deadly Fall, as there are tons of routes to pick from, some with incredibly long drops for plenty of trick opportunities. I do wish that this iced over canyon actually functioned like a halfpipe. That would be cool. If there's one thing truly missing from the courses, it's the lack of any real secrets. You can find shortcuts and stuff, but there's no secret stunt areas or anything that could really be considered an Easter egg. 1080 was a really good looking game for its time, and while rough edges are definitely showing 20 years later, it still holds up very nicely, especially when compared to its peers. Particle effects blast powder in your face as you careen down the mountain, and the wind even ripples your character's clothing at high speed, which is an especially convincing effect. The snow that gets thrown up as you execute sweeping turns is actually a polygonal object that animates very smoothly. This blur effect you were treated to at the end of races was pretty impressive, even if low res. There's even full cast shadows for the characters and reflections when you went over ice, both of which were really unusual to see at the time. And speaking of the characters, the animation is particularly impressive. They lean and move realistically and interact with the angle of the ground.
What is this? What is that?
During turns, they even reach out and touch the ground, dragging a path in the snow realistically. Characters also directionally react to collisions and will even push themselves back up if they fall. The different materials you board over also have really good feedback to the player. The difference between hardpack and powder is palpable, and after playing enough, you can just tell when a landing is going to hurt. If you can, aim for the powder to land, but stay on the hardpack for speed. The frame rate is generally pretty good for the system, but certain courses do have their problem areas. The 2D trees and
Golden Force
seem to chug the system to a halt. I wonder if it's due to transparency.
No one really knows why, but it seemed like in the late 90s, any game with good graphics had to have a killer lens flare. It really did seem like a thing at the time.
I mean, Zelda, Turok 2, World Driver, and so on.
It was the single most overused effect of the day. I mean, an understated lens flare in the era of 240p just didn't exist. And 1080 snowboarding was no different. But, I mean, the lens flares still hold up really great. I mean, look at that.
Sun and snow isn't the only weather option either, as you encounter effects like fog and blizzard conditions in the harder difficulties of Match Race. Rather than leaning on licensed music, all the tunes in 1080 are original, and they're a mix of styles that were popular at the time. The poppy electro tracks work pretty well, and while the electronic guitar riffs in some of the rock tracks won't fool anyone, they still sound pretty decent for the N64. Where the music really stands out though is in the drum and bass loops found in the replay footage at the end of race screens.
I don't know, is it just me? I mean, I just really like it. I mean, the samples sound pretty good, and it just fits the footage really well. A handful of tracks actually have voice samples with lyrics, like the iconic Rock Your Body track from The Lodge, but I really gotta question some of this stuff. I mean, check this out.
Go!
As with Wave Race 64, you can't take 1080 snowboarding completely seriously. So don't forget to check out my 1080 snowboarding supplemental, where I get into some of the cheats and extras in the game. It's definitely worth a look.
And if you don't want to see it, well...
Too bad.
With 1080 snowboarding, Nintendo EAD once again showed us how great an extreme sports title could look and play on the N64, and arguably a competitor to its gameplay wouldn't come along for several years.
1080 is still a pretty fun game, and while the landing mechanics do have a pretty steep learning curve, I think it's worth revisiting either on the N64 or by using the Wii Virtual Console re-release that came out in 2008.
Leave your 1080 memories in the comments section, and don't forget to check out Dome Candy Games on Facebook. And thank you as always for watching Dome Candy Games, because video games are like candy for your dome.
Nice try.